Welcome to the Health Babes podcast with Doctors Becky Campbell and Crystal Hohn, where we talk everything health.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining the Health Babes podcast today. Today we have Sarah Kay Hoffman, who's the founder of A Gutsy Girl, which is an online community geared towards women who are looking for reasonable approaches for healing IBS, IBD, SIBO, and all things gut. What began as an online journal documenting the day-to-day with one health issue after the next would become less story-focused and more research and journalistic-based. Today, she spends 100% of her career-focused time on A Gutsy Girl, doing everything from speaking to companies worldwide on gut health and the inspiration for achieving it to researching, writing, and creating tools like her 90-day gut healing journey, Healing Blooms from Within for women worldwide. She has also published a book, The Leaky Gut Meal Plan, 4 weeks to detox and improve digestive health, along with several ebooks and other guides. Thanks so much for coming on, Sarah.
I'm so excited to be here to talk to you guys today. I'm sitting in the opposite chair of when Dr. Becky was on my show recently.
I love it.
Yeah, she has a great podcast.
It's so fun to get to, even though we're separated in actual life, you can feel so connected because you can come on podcast shows and just sit down and talk. Like sometimes I think about it and I'm like, I'm pretty sure I talk to my podcasting friends and my internet friends more than my real life friends because it's just like, there's no time left,
It's true. That is so true. Well, why don't we talk a little bit about your story? Like, how did you get into gut health?
Okay. So my story is very, very, very long. The short and dirty of it. So I, from very early on, there's not much that I can say, I definitely was always the kid that was tired and extra tired. Like my cousins would be staying up until midnight 1 playing and I would be like all snuggled and nestled into my sleeping bag. So I was always like a little bit more lethargic, I would say. But for the most part, I had a pretty normal everything. I fell into the trap in high school of really starting chronic dieting, under eating, just tinkering a lot. And I think, that's kind of when my story probably begins is when I did test out a lot of different alternative ways of eating. But what happened then really was my freshman year of college. I had just left home. I just gotten out of a pretty a long and serious relationship. It was things going on at that time, but I came down also with an illness. To this day, I don't really even know what it was, but it was the beginning of the year and I just got so sick. I was sick for a couple of weeks. I remember my mom hour from where I grew up. And she was like, I was about ready to come there because we couldn't get you to answer the phone or anything. And I was just so sick. Anyways, after that, I never fully recovered. And when I say I never fully recovered, I mean, for the rest of my freshman year of college, you could come into the room at any given day. It would smell like a rotten egg. It was absolutely disgusting. Few years would be plagued with pharyngitis and tonsillitis. I just kept getting sicker. I never really changed anything, but I would go to the doctor like everyone else and get on an antibiotic. And then I would seemingly be well for a couple months and I would get sick again. So all of that to say, at the end of my college time, I ended up having my tonsils and my adenoids removed because I thought, hey, this is going to solve all my problems. More. I'm going to have these removed. And what I learned right then and there is that we can remove some little factor, but if you're not actually changing something that needs to be changed or resolved, we don't change. And so I had the tonsils out, the adenoids out, but I actually then over time just kept getting sicker. So I was fine for a while. Fast forward then to 2008. So it would have been, a few years later, I was actually diagnosed with colitis. I started to have a lot of stomach problems in the sense that I was bloating a lot and it was like I seemingly couldn't tolerate any types of food. And so because they couldn't figure out what was going to very traditional medicine route. So we didn't do any kind of alternative testing or anything at that time. to definitely do a colonoscopy and an endoscopy because colitis does run on both sides of my family. So I had that done and they diagnosed me with colitis, a very mild form of it though, called proctitis, which affects the lowest part of the intestines, which is the rectum. And so the solution at the time were suppositories. And so I just wanted to feel better like everybody else. So I took the suppositories and of course they actually made me worse. I know that I'm sure that they're beneficial at all for me. And so went off the suppositories. And basically what happened then from 2008 to 2014, there's so much information and there that I'm going to leave out. But basically what happened was I went through so many ebbs and flows, ups and downs, going to different doctors. I mean, if anyone's listening right now and you haven't been diagnosed with anything yet, you know this feeling, but your doctor, I would get in the office and they would say, your tests are fine. You're fine. Nothing's wrong. And I would just leave with tears because I was like, I know that that's not true. And so I think really what happened was before I actually got my final diagnosis, I also couldn't get pregnant, which is, it can be another symptom for females or, a problem that happens if there's something that's undiagnosed. I couldn't get pregnant. And so we actually ended up going through an entire IVF cycle. And during that cycle, this was in 2012, I believe. During that cycle, I was on so many drugs and medications. And again, if you've been through that, you know what that's like as well. But it was really, really, really hard on my body. The IVF cycle ended in not getting pregnant. But in addition to that, I had 8 eggs rupture in me. Well, there's cysts, obviously. And I got even sicker. And so I would spend the next couple years just really reevaluating everything. How could I actually start healing and how could I take this into my own hands? And what did I need to do to start learning and researching and really understanding that nothing would change if nothing would change. And so I did. I mean, I really have for the past decade, immersed myself in all things gut health and gut healing and why these things happen. And I have done every kind of quote unquote gut healing diet you can imagine out there. And that's a whole nother, conversation with all the things that I've learned along the way by doing it, I'm practicing on myself. And in 2014, I would learn when I finally found a fantastic alternative practitioner who saved my life. I swear by it, that what was really going on was I had a low functioning thyroid, quote unquote, adrenal fatigue. And then the biggest thing was an undiagnosed, and I'm guessing for years based on what happened to me my freshman year of college, SIBO, which stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And getting that was the start of my true and forever healing, which that was in 2014. And it took me until 2018. I think I had 3 or 4 more relapses, 2018 to heal forever for good. I've had 0 problems since then. Clean endoscopy, clean colonoscopy. To this day, I eat everything, and I will say just to kind of finish up this part of my story, I really was, I guess you could say, propelled into the next phase of learning and being passionate about the gut and gut health and gut healing and helping and just providing for the community as much as I could because I healed in 2018, but in 2019, my father passed away from an 18-month battle with colon cancer. And so I always think the irony, I truly believe, and it's one of my things I say all the time, everything happens. I mean, everything is beautiful in its time. I have it tattooed on me. And so I believe that watching him going through that, knowing what his life consisted of up until then, and just watching that dying process and just knowing exactly what it was, obviously what killed me internally and thinking, why was it then that I could keep going after that? And why was it that I personally didn't relapse? I mean, it was such a stressor. And I think there was a reason. And the reason was because I should keep going and sharing my story and doing the research and helping as many people as possible. So here I am today. I have adopted 3 children. Yeah, just doing all the work that we can. So that's a nutshell.
Yes. And really just making that your why, right? Everything that you went through with your dad and your story, you're just really helping people. I mean, I feel that's why a lot of us too, I mean, me and Beck can speak for that, even getting into functional medicine from our own health experiences too, right? And we just want to share that with people.
Exactly. I think it's important too. And I think all the different people that I've talked to, I think the best people that are functional practitioners or that help anyone in any kind of way and from a medical standpoint are people that have gone through something themselves versus just reading about it in a textbook.
It's so true. So true. Because you have so much compassion for what the person's feeling because you've been through it. So it makes a huge difference for sure.
So why don't we, for our listeners, can you break down what the gut microbiome is and why having a healthy microbiome is so important?
Yeah. So the microbiome, like obviously today, the gut microbiome is getting all of the highlight and the talk, but we obviously have our entire body, like the skin microbiome, and there's everything. But the gut microbiome really is just all of the microbes, the bacteria, the fungi, the viruses that live on and it's really interesting because as humans, it's so weird for me to think about it like this, but we're mostly microbes. Like microbes outnumber our human cells I think there's over 100 trillion or something of them. And the majority of them live in our guts, primarily in the large intestine. So the microbiome is so crucial. That's why they say, 8%, which is such a large gap, but whatever, even if it's 50% of the immune system lies in the gut microbiome. And so I think that it's so important that we understand what the microbiome is and how it can either help or hurt us.
Yeah, that's how whenever we work with, all patients, but, specifically autoimmune patients, we really want them to understand how much their gut health plays a role in that because of that, being where the immune system lives primarily.
Right.
Yeah. And, the thing is, like, there's been so much research lately, like how the bacteria in the microbiome helps us die. I mean, it has so many functions and purposes, regulating the immune system, like we've been talking about. It can protect against other bacteria that causes diseases. It helps to produce the vitamins and the minerals that we need in order to thrive and survive. Even there's a lot of talk right now about fecal transplants for people that don't have a good microbiome. And there's been, the research with C. diff and everything, but it's just fascinating how if yours is quote unquote good or not so good, that how it can really affect your entire life from your weight to your mood to your disease or not, or, everything.
Hormone levels. I mean, it's the hormones in the gut are very closely tied. So, all right. So let's talk about fiber. So how important is fiber for the gut? And then can you talk about the different types of fiber?
Yes. It's so interesting to me when I think about fiber and talk about fiber, because especially right now with the whole, blow up of the keto revolution
and carnivore.
And I think about my own journey before I talk a little bit about fiber is that the way I think about fiber today is vastly different from the way that I did at the beginning of my journey. In 2009, I did a very rigid, strict GAPS protocol, which I'm sure your listeners are very privy to all of these acronyms, but it's just the gut and psychology syndrome. And when I did that, lived, about 98% off of meat, fat, and broth, which and I rarely ever had fiber. And at that time, even though I was undiagnosed with SIBO at the time, that worked for me. And that worked so well for me. In fact, it worked so well for me that I touted it all the time as this is what you have to do. And fiber is the enemy, and I look back now and it kind of makes me sad, to be honest with you, because I think that the research doesn't show that. And it's not true overall. I do believe that limiting fiber or choosing the right types of fiber, for example, we'll talk a little bit about soluble and insoluble fiber, different types of fibers, can help definitely and might be absolutely critical for a period of time. But to eliminate fibers for the long term, I think is a really, really awful strategy. And so, okay, so there's two types of fibers, right? There's soluble fiber and there's insoluble fiber. And the soluble fiber is the type that it dissolves in water and it's digested by bacteria in the large intestine. So what that really does then is that is the type of fiber that's going to add bulk to the stool. And that's what we want. That's, when I share with my kids about, okay, this is what we're looking for after we go to the bathroom. They're little, by the way. We want these thicker, bulkier stools. That's preferred versus no stool or very loose stool, right? And so that's really what soluble fiber is helping to do. The other thing is, soluble fiber feeds gut bacteria. So what I love about fiber and why I think it's so critical is when you get into the prebiotic conversation. Everybody knows what probiotics are because we've been talking about them forever now. They at least know at very high level, I need a probiotic, whether that's true or not. But prebiotics as much. And pre obviously is just something that comes before, right? So prebiotics are so crucial because they help feed what's already there, good and thriving. And that's what soluble fiber does. If you have good gut bacteria, it's going to feed it and it's going to help populate it more. I think that it just really depends on the type of fiber that's going to work for you at any given moment. But I think that it is critical. We can talk about just a couple different insoluble because this is something else, if people have a lot of gut problems, they tend to think, oh my gosh, like this cruciferous vegetables, broccoli and cauliflower, it's making me miserable. If you understand the difference between soluble and insoluble fibers, though, it can help really understand why that might be. So some soluble fiber foods would be things like black beans or Brussels sprouts, sweet potatoes, turnips, apricots, apples. Something to make note of, though, is even when you think about soluble versus insoluble fiber foods, the reality is that almost all high fiber foods contain both. It's just, obviously a matter of to what extent. And then some insoluble ones would be like your bananas, spinach, kale, brown rice. And some of those, if you have a lot of current gut problems, can be overall, though, I would say fiber is not something that is a great strategy to avoid in the long term. It really helps to clear out waste. And, even though they recommend 25 or to 30 grams of fiber in the United States a day, I think I've read studies that most Americans get 5 grams. And the thing is, the cultures, it's been studied and proven, the cultures that have the most thriving gut bacteria, they are consuming upwards of 80 to 100 grams of fiber a day. So our 25 to 30 is measly to begin with. And we're not even anywhere near that.
Yeah. I think, as far as the short term versus the long term, it's like reducing carbs and that type of stuff when, you have a gut infection. So let's say you have an overgrowth of opportunistic bacteria or yeast or the bacteria in the small intestine. It can make you seem better because that, like you said, the fiber coming from that and some of the carbohydrates can actually feed the bacteria. So when you have the bad bacteria in there, it may make you more bloated and that type of stuff. But once you can, we work on with protocols, like herbal protocols to get rid of the bacteria or the issue, we always have people go back up because we don't think it's good long-term, like you were saying. All right. So let's talk about some other lifestyle factors that impact the gut, like stress, lack of sleep, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, this is something that I'm actually very lifestyle factors because so the way that I look at the gut health and gut healing is broken down into my 3 pillars, which I've always taught, preached, all the things. The first is diagnosis. The second is diet. And the third is lifestyle. These pillars that kind of, I think, go in that order, if you will. I think that the lifestyle pillar is probably the most important for the long run. It is, but it's also the hardest one to really conquer. I guess you don't ever conquer it, right? You work on that stuff forever, but conquer the lifestyle pieces that are hard for you to get down in the long run. So lifestyle, when I talk about diagnosis and then diet, and lifestyle would be anything outside of that. And so lifestyle would be things like stress. So, it's so interesting to me, the whole stress conversation as it relates to healing. Always used to say, I would just do an internal eye roll all the time when the doctors would say, you need to learn how to manage your stress. I was like, I'm not stressed. I go for mile runs. I do a couple deep breathing things. I would lie to myself all the time and say that I wasn't stressed in so many different forms. It is not just, oh my gosh, I have this big work. It is so much more than that. In fact, that's another thing I will say as part of lifestyle on the workouts is me doing those 8-mile runs was definitely a stressor on my body, under eating and overworking out. So lifestyle can include stress. It can include your workouts, whether you are not moving enough or moving far too much for what you're eating or what your other current life circumstances are. That's one that I think people, especially women who I normally talk to, have a really hard understanding the workout component of it. It wasn't until I gave up, these long, intense, I was able to heal for good. I had to take almost an entire year off and just walk things in order to fully heal. But workouts, and also, the opposite is true. If you're not moving at all, you have to move. Like, I believe that walking is the best form of exercise that anybody can do because it's just so gentle. You can breathe. You can, you could listen to something while you're doing it, but it's still moving. It's getting your circulation in motion, and it's good for you.
And it's good mentally, I love running, but I have to make myself walk a lot of the time. And it's hard when you're a runner to walk, but it is really good mentally and obviously physically because it's less aggressive on your, body. So
it's very hard too, like talking to a lot of our athletes, when we're trying to heal hormones and healing the gut, people who are really pushing themselves. And I mean, like you said, you were running 8 miles a day. Is that what you said? It can sometimes just be not good for you, when you're going through a lot health-wise. You got to really look at your lifestyle factors because it plays a really important role with the gut especially.
It really increases stress too, because it messes with your cortisol and your hormones. And you're just tanked. And it's really hard when you're that type of person who likes to go hard, go big or go home is, the motto. It's very hard to go into walking or something, I really find resistance training with resting in between has been like a savior for me because I can still get a very good workout, but I'm not doing like HIIT training or even supersetting really where I'm not getting that rest. And for me, that is like, I kind of feel the same after that as I do after walking. Like you feel good, but not like beat.
Yeah. And I love that you guys like to talk about this because I think it's something that as women or when women are trying to heal, we don't talk about because we don't really think of it as being a factor, especially when women try to tell themselves, oh, I work out stress. But that's just not, your body doesn't know if you're stressed because of work or because you're running. Your body, it doesn't get the memo.
And also you can gain a lot of weight that way. Like a lot of people think that they have to work out so hard to lose weight, and they're actually doing the opposite because of what it's doing to their hormones.
Yep. That was me when I was a chronic half marathoner. Today, I still do like to run, but the way that I do it is different. If I train for anything, which I haven't for a few years, but I like to do trail running. And the reason is because I love being in nature. One, because I feel like I'm very connected to my dad when I do that, but also because it's in the woods and I never go too fast. I can't. I have to focus so much on footwork and everything. So it's not like I'm trying to train for sub whatever half marathon.
Yeah, we used to have a mountain, remember, Chris, Kennesaw, when we were in school, and it was like my therapy. I would run 6 miles on it because it was a big mountain, but you weren't like running a 7-minute mile. It was like 12-minute mile at the, and even walking part of it and whatever, but it was like therapy. It was awesome. I loved that. I miss that about living in Florida. We don't have that here. We don't even have hills.
Why don't we talk a little bit about leaky gut, Sarah? What is it and why is it so important to address for long-term health?
So the conversation of leaky gut, I wrote the book, The Leaky Gut Meal Plan, back in 2019. And doing research around leaky gut, you start to realize how the terms that you use for anything, which is why I always say, quote unquote, adrenal fatigue, because traditional medicine does not want to talk about leaky gut at all. And so the reason I even say that is because the way that you'll hear it and the way that I tend to talk about a little bit more is intestinal permeability, because that is the technical medical term. And even at that, there are still a lot of practitioners that do not recognize it, that do not believe in it, or that it's a thing. But I'm living proof that it is. So leaky gut, intestinal permeability is just basically when imagine it like they're these tight junctions that are lining your intestines and they become permeable, meaning they separate. And so if you were to take 4 fingers, it's just the best visual I can ever do, 4 fingers, separate them a little bit. That's kind of like leaky gut. And so they separate. And so things that are not supposed to get through to the bloodstream get through. And so many things can occur because of it. The number one thing that I see happening because of leaky gut are food intolerances. So in 2008, I did an entire food intolerance test. And when I did that, I was allergic to nothing, because I also did the skin prick test just to make sure, allergic to nothing, 2 things. And so at the time, because I didn't know anything about much about anything, I was like, okay, here's my list of 22 foods. I will avoid these foods like the plague because they are making me so sick. And the reality is that some of them maybe were, but most of them, the truth is that it was just because my gut was very leaky. I had to work really hard on healing it, sealing up the intestinal in order to be able to tolerate everything that I can today. So when we talk about leaky gut, that's what it is. Really just things seep through that are not supposed to. And because of it, so many things can happen. Everything from the deficiencies, your body is like, you keep eating and eating more and eating more, and you actually could be hungrier and gaining more weight because you're not even absorbing the nutrients. Or the other, you could become completely deficient. When I had leaky gut mixed with SIBO, I was so deficient in B12 in particular that I was taking injections to my stomach. A lot of skin issues. Leaky gut is obviously, as a theory, but a theory that I prescribe to, a precursor to many, many, many other things, different forms of IBD, Crohn's, colitis. I think research, I'm pretty sure all research points to any of those things. People also have a quote unquote leaky gut.
Yeah, people ask us for food sensitivity testing in our office, and we won't do it until they've healed their gut, because it's really most of the time, like we used to do a very thorough food sensitivity panel, which is a great panel, but we would do it before testing the gut. This is, maybe 8 years ago I did this. And then it was like these, it's overwhelming because it's like, oh my gosh, I can't eat these 45 foods. And then I learned when we heal the gut and then we retest, these aren't there anymore, most of them. So then I was like, you know what? I'm not doing any food sensitivity tests. We're going to test the gut. We're going to work on that. And then if you still feel like you have sensitivities to foods, then we'll do it. I couldn't tell you the last time I ran a food sensitivity test, because once we heal the gut, or, they heal their gut with our guidance, they can eat so many more foods, and they don't want that test anymore. So it's really all about that gut permeability with the food sensitivities to me, most of them.
And I'm curious too, you guys work a lot with histamines. So is there a correlation like with leaky gut and high histamine producing foods? Do you know of anything, or is there research around it? That's an interesting thing for me, because it seems like a lot of people, if they can't tolerate certain foods and have been told that they have leaky gut, a lot of those foods are high histamine foods.
Yeah. It's because the enzyme that breaks down histamine is primarily in the lining of the gut. So when they break down that enzyme, so they can't tolerate those high histamine foods very well at all.
DAO? Yes,
the DAO enzyme. Yeah.
And then as you address the underlying imbalances, most patients can start to tolerate some of the, the histamine foods, mostly a lot of them. Of course, everybody is so different, but
also the bad bacteria in the gut produces histamine. So you have a breakdown of that enzyme that breaks down histamine, and then you're producing more histamine in the gut with these infections. So it's really a lot of gut work that we do.
Interesting. That all makes perfect sense. Simple, simple, not easy.
so for anybody listening who has gut symptoms, where can they start easily to help heal the gut and alleviate? Like, where would you guide them?
I love this question so much. I'm writing my book. It's actually almost done. It'll be out in January. And it doesn't help with this in the way that a lot of books promise to help with any certain thing, but this is what I truly believe when I tell anyone where to start. So there's a couple things. One is that everyone wants to start with the thing. So is it, I need to give up gluten. I need to give up dairy. I need this supplement. They want to know the thing. And believe me, I am so type A that if there was a thing and it worked for everyone across the board, I would have healed in a week. I will follow something to make sure that it happens according to my plans and the rules immediately. So if it were that easy, so many people would not be sick because I'm not the only type A person in the world. So having said that, there's no one way. And I think if you're sitting there today and you're miserable, the best thing, the very first thing that you can do is get yourself ready in order to start identifying some patterns that you can then take to a practitioner. And I truly believe in functional practitioners. I also believe that there's a time and a place for a combination of Western meets more like functional or holistic. But you start with a food journal, a food and lifestyle journal, not just food, but also lifestyle. Just keep track. You don't even have to change anything for the next couple of weeks. I think sometimes we're so desperate to heal that we make all these changes and then we have no idea what's working and what doesn't. So if you have never done anything, never dabbled into the world of healing and helping yourself feel better, just even for meticulous notes, keep track of all the things that you're eating, how you're living, record all these different lifestyle things that we talked about today. Just keep track. And then after that, really consider working with somebody. I can't stress enough the importance of it because especially if you've been miserable for a long time, I mean, there's a difference between feeling poorly every once in a while for a day here and there and chronically not feeling well. So if you've I can't stress enough, go and get help, some professional help. Bring your journal with you and let them be the person that can be your partner and help you get any kind of appropriate diagnosis or just thoughts in general. If you need to make basic changes, the most basic change that I think one can make is to cut the processed food. Instead of excluding entire categories of foods, just cut processed foods and eat more whole foods. Again, it sounds so simplistic, but one, it's true. And two, it's not easy. So that's always a great place to start. And then also when you're recording in your journal, keep track of what your bowel movements look like. I mean, women really don't want to talk about this, but it's so important that you look and that you know and make notes about anything that's consistent. If you look on the Bristol stool scale, there's from a 1 to a 7 and it'll show you, a 1 is real hard to pass stools and a 7 is very watery diarrhea. So over the past 5 days, have you been noticing that you're like a 6 or a 7 every day? That can be really great information for your practitioner, for someone to help yourself. So I think those are the two most basic and simple things: journal and cut processed foods.
Yeah, we do for food and mood journals with everybody. And the poop question is actually one of them because we want to know what it looks like. And our patients really have no problem talking about poop with us. So they like to give us a lot of detail on that.
And if not, we ask lots.
Yeah, we ask. We want to know. One thing I want to say about a food journal, some people who've had any type of disordered eating kind of get intimidated by that. And we like to stress that it's not about weight or what you look like. It's just really documenting information to help us and you figure out what food is doing to you. Like what foods does your body like and what foods does your body not like? And that's the purpose of it.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough too. In fact, so Dr. Becky, but I have my own food journal that I created. And I talk about that in there too when I teach people how to food journal for their practitioners. I have a post on my website called something about journaling versus using like a MyFitnessPal. This is not the same thing. I never, ever, ever count a calorie. When I was healing, even if I would do portions, it's more so because sometimes you can have, 2 cups of broccoli. And of course, you're going to feel miserable, like raw broccoli. So that's the only time that it would be relevant is if like the quantities of something that is otherwise seemingly quote unquote very healthy, like, you can find patterns there. But beyond that, there's no reason to do anything. Like there's no meticulous weighing on a food scale. You can throw that away. It's not important for that you understand the foods that you're eating and the general quantity if you're having a lot of bloating or gas or diarrhea.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And we'll link to that journal in the show notes because it's awesome. So, all right. Well, where can people find you? I know you have an awesome Instagram page. I love your Instagram. I look at your Instagram all the time. You have great infographics, but where else can they find you? And what's your handle on Instagram?
You can pretty much find me everywhere at a Gutsy Girl, AGUTSY girl, a Gutsy Girl. There's a whole story behind a Gutsy Girl too. It's again, I think that everything always happens as it should. But yeah, so then my website is just agutsygirl.com. I have a YouTube. I have my own podcast, which you are on. Yeah.
Well, you've been awesome. This has been a really great interview. And I think that people are going to get a lot from this. And it's, I think that you've explained it in a way that makes it really easy to understand and really not intimidating at all. So we really appreciate you coming on. And we hope that everybody loved this interview as much as we did. And if you did, then leave a review and don't forget to mention Sarah's name so people know what interview you were talking about. So thank you for coming on, Sarah.
Thank you so much, you guys. It was so fun.
It was.
And thanks everyone for listening and everybody have a great day.